the Gracies, Fedor Emelianenko, Anderson Silva, Matt Hughes, GSP. These are all fighters who've been called the greatest of all time. But the way that this sport is evolving, I think it might be better to call them the greatest of their time. Hi, I'm Dan Cox. Thanks for joining me. We have heard this word, the greatest of all time, from boxing to MMA, every sport, there's the greatest of all time. I truly believe it's being used a little bit too loosely when it comes to MMA, especially with the UFC. You have guys that are all called the greatest of all time, and I mean, obviously, that's not possible to have. Those fighters are definitely going to go down in MMA history, in the Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it. But the way, as I said, the way the sport is evolving, you're starting to see athletes that would be competing in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, professional soccer, elite athletes choosing to fight in MMA, in combat. And we're starting to see just such a huge rise in the talent level, in the skill set of these fighters. It's really impressive. Now, if you're going to talk about the greatest of all time, how do you define that? Is that just in performance in the cage? Is that in and out of the cage? Kind of like Muhammad Ali, in and out of the ring? Someone that brings all of that attention outside the ring as well as when they're inside? Maybe like a Conor McGregor? Or is it just based on their skill when they're competing? I think it's a little bit of all of those things. But I also think it's really impossible to put that label on one person when the sport's evolving so fast. Again, I think it has to come down to the time they're fighting, that era. You know, they're the best of their time. So you look at someone, you're going to say greatest of all time, you have to throw in the name Jon Jones. Jon Jones, I think everybody would agree, if he had not, basically kind of ruined his career with his personal problems and what's happened with the failed tests and everything else, I think we would all consider Jon Jones the greatest of all time. He has been the best in his generation, his era, no doubt about that. He's undefeated. Now, you could say he lost to Matt Hamill, but, I mean, really, he was penalized for ripping his lip off his face with nasty, nasty elbows. I mean, Jon Jones won that fight. So Jones he's never lost. And this is a guy, you've got to remember, let's look at Jones's career for a second. 3-4 years training in MMA, he's a UFC champ. Not only does he become the UFC champ, he becomes the face of the UFC, the face of MMA. He carries a persona that really wasn't who Jon is, and we know that now. Now, whether that was the UFC wanting him to carry that or that was his choice, it doesn't really matter. The point was he was being someone he really wasn't, and this all caught up to him, the pressure, everything, and he just imploded. He imploded. Does that take him off of the best, the greatest of all time list? I think it would have to. But then again, with his skill, he's still the best fighter that we've seen. We've not seen another fighter like Jon Jones. And I realize a lot of people think, listen, Jon's got a drug problem, he's got this problem. I've got to tell you, it was no secret behind the scenes. and that small circle that Jones was partying. There was no secret. Actually, people were surprised he had never been flagged with a test. But Jones was able to literally party up until the day of the fight, the day before the fight, and go in there, compete against the best in the world, and dominate. And that's what Jones did. He dominated, and you cannot take that away from the guy. Bad decisions? No doubt about it. But he might be a guy that thrives on drama. He might have to have all that chaos going on in his life to compete. You know, very few people could compete under those circumstances. And, I mean, you could imagine, what could Jones do if he was training full camps, if he was healthy, if he was, drug-free and this and that? Who knows? Maybe he wouldn't be able to compete at all that way. It's just one of those things you don't know. But with Jon Jones, whether you love him or you hate him, you have to put him in that conversation of greatest of all time. I mean, it's similar to Floyd Mayweather. Now, is Floyd Mayweather the greatest of all time in boxing? I don't think so. But he's definitely in that conversation. I do think he's probably the greatest defensive boxer I've ever seen, and beyond a doubt, the greatest money maker in the history of combat sports. Undeniable right there. Does that give him, an edge in the greatest of all time? I mean, I would think so. So we have to remember, when we're speaking in terms like greatest of all time, that we don't just throw that out there, without really putting some thought into it, because it is about of that fighter's time. The sport is evolving fast. It's a great time to be a fan of combat. So listen, guys, do me a favor. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Every bit makes a difference. So, for Modern Pugilist Entertainment, I'm Dan Cox, and I will see you next time.